Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Excited to have you all here. I can see you all flooding into the webinar. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes for everyone to join. We're so excited to have you here, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us to talk about how to measure influencer performance. While we're letting a couple of minutes go to get people in, we'd love to see where everyone's joining from, whether it's the company or location. Drop it into the chat so we can see who we have here. We have some incredible brands joining us today. And again, so excited to have you all here. We're in a minute or so, but I can see a flurry of activity. We've got people coming from Ben & Jerry's. We've got people coming from Santa Monica, Doc Martens, Olio, amazing brands here today. New York City, I can see Colleen Cleary there. Hello, Colleen. Yeah, nice turnout today. Abercrombie, amazing. Hi from Croatia, Louisville, Kentucky. Okay, everyone's here today. All right. Awesome. Well, I think we can maybe get started. I'm sure we'll have some more people joining, and keep feeling free to throw in where you're joining us from so our team can check out who we have with us today. But again, we're so excited to have you join. To introduce myself, my name is Grace Murray. I am the Vice President of Strategy at Fohr. Pronouns are she, her. And I've been at Fohr for a whopping 8 years, which is kind of wild. And it means that I've been with Fohr since we were literally a handful of people working out of an apartment, trying to convince anyone who would listen that fashion bloggers were the future and that you should work with them to be able to get your brand message out there. We had about 1,200 people in our fashion blogger directory. We are now a lot bigger than that. We've got over 150,000 people who are a part of the Fohr community. We have an incredible group of people on our team. There's around 80 of us. We're based in New York City in the Lower East Side. They are all smart, special, stunning humans. And we are so proud to be able to work with them as well as some of our incredible clients. This is just a snapshot at some of the amazing brands that we have the honor and pleasure to be able to work with. I know a lot of them are joining today. So if any of our clients from any of these brands or any others are joining, please feel free to jump into the chat and say hello. And hopefully we'll hear from a lot more of you today. If we're not working together yet, we would love to hear from you. We would love to talk to you about your specific measurement strategy, your specific strategy, what you're coming up against, your problems. We're here for you. So if you want to reach out to us, you can at hello@fohr.co. And with that, we can kind of start getting things in motion. So first, I want to just take a moment to talk about what today's webinar is and also what it is not. So let's start with what it's not. First of all, it's not going to be a one silver bullet catch-all metric that says this is going to make all of your influencer marketing performance completely unified in measurement. It's not about a secret proprietary formula. I think we have enough of those out there in the market. We're not team EMV is everything. We're not team engagement is everything. We're not team affiliate or nothing. It's a lot more nuanced than that. So today we're going to talk about what success is and what it means. We're going to talk about having a goal setting mindset. We're going to look at data. I know you're all here for data from over 20,000 accounts. We're going to break it down by tier, vertical, sponsored versus organic. And then we're also going to give you some tips on setting fair benchmarks so you can proceed with more confidence when you're measuring your campaigns. I mentioned that we have a perfect, stunning, special team. I'm joined by 3 of them today, and I'm going to hand over the mic momentarily for them to each introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lucy Jones. Nice to meet you. I'm the operations manager here at Fohr. I've been at the company for around 2 years now, and I work with the campaigns and product teams to analyze workflows and help meet business goals. Excited to chat.
Hey everyone, I'm Erin. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a manager on the account and campaigns team here at Fohr, coming up on my 4-year anniversary this summer. And I've had the pleasure of working with a ton of great brands like Dyson, OXO, Supergoop, and a lot of others underneath the Estee Lauder umbrella. I'm excited to dig in.
Hi, all. My name is Brandon. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a director here at Fohr. I've been at Fohr a little over 4 years now, and have had the pleasure of working across a lot of different brands and verticals. I've done everything from like toilet paper and politics and dating apps to more recently working on larger ambassador programs for fashion and retail and beauty brands. So excited to jump into this today. Before we get started, we do have a warning for y'all. Viewer discretion is advised. Content isn't graphic. There are graphs, but we're not getting graphic. This is really more focused on kind of the universal is specific here. We're trying to talk to all of y'all about the different ways that we measure success on a campaign. But definitely hit us up if you want to talk more specifically about your programs and ways that we can work together.
Awesome. Again, looks like we have a couple of hundred people in here today. So I'm sure you all have different problems, different goals, different objectives. So we're not going to caveat every single thing that we say to say, well, it could also be this and it could also be this, but we would love to talk to you. So the first thing to kick us off today is we're going to talk about what is success, which is a pretty existential question for a webinar. What is success? So I want to kick things off with another question, which is how fast should a human be able to run a mile? This is obviously a pretty difficult question to ask or to answer, and immediately brings up so many other questions. How fit is this person? How old is this person? Is this a, someone youthful? Is this grandpa who seems to be wearing my shirt today? Are they sprinting the fastest they possibly can run this one time, or are they training to be able to run faster all the time? Are they running flat or are they running uphill? There is so many additional questions that we could be asking here. In Australia, there's a saying, how long is a piece of string? And the same can be said for what is success. I want to tell a quick story. This is a photo of myself, our CEO, James, and Jill from our team. This was a couple of years ago. We had just won the Equinox account. Part of our strategy was bringing some of the fittest, most spectacular fitness influencers in New York City to this really advanced class. And it was like a showcase of the hardest portions of 3 different classes to really kind of hook these fitness influencers in. So I set myself the goal, being, in the client management type of a role, of finishing the class. I was like, hey, I'm not fit. All I need to do is finish the class. That's my goal. And that's all I need to be doing here. Here we have our first chart of the day, me as the little pink dot down the bottom, and my goal, which was finishing this advanced Equinox showcase, which I did. I finished it. Instead of taking a little sippy cup of branded kombucha at the end of the class, like they were offering me, I had to run to the bathroom and throw up. And I did not work out again ever. No, I'm kidding. I did not work out again for months, truly. And so that was the wrong goal. The wrong goal was I shouldn't have set a goal to just finish that class. The right goal would have been to get fitter and to get better and to build up to that place. I was in no place to be trying to get to that aggressive of a goal. And had I taken a more informed and sustainable approach, I would have probably kept going instead of just not working out forever and a day afterward. And so the same thing can really be said for influencer marketing and a lot of the problems that we see in the space. In pursuit of short-term, high performance and misinformed goals, we really jeopardize our own success long-term. And, the wrong goal often means the wrong approach. And then it means that we have really unhelpful results. There's so much generalization in the space, and there's really not a lot of time and attention placed on first thinking about those goals and setting that path to getting there. So instead of asking how fast a human should run a mile, it really should be asking how fast you can run a mile. And that's really what we want to be talking about today. So each time we run that mile, we can get a little bit faster. And so with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Miss Lucy Jones, who is going to start to take us through some data that you can build from in terms of defining and setting your own success.
Awesome. Let's get into it. So we have analyzed hundreds of thousands of data points across various verticals, platforms, and audience sizes to better understand the nuances of influencer performance. So taking a look at our database, a few things to know before we dive in. Our data set is one, extremely large. We've included around 53,000 posts from our database in this sample. Our data set is ever changing. So our data set includes posts from 2021, but as the world changes, so do platforms and features and ultimately behavior on social. So while our data represents a moment in time, we're always on the pulse of and watching what's shifting and what's changing within the space. And lastly, we have calculated medians to ultimately set a standard and look past really extreme outliers that may sway data if we would have used averages. So you may be asking, why would you use medians here? I'm going to recruit the help of Mr. Bezos here to help me answer that. No, medians are not sold on Amazon. The median is the most informative measure of central tendency for skewed distributions. So put in a way that does not sound like a math textbook, we can think about rent costs in New York. If we take the average rent price in New York, people like Mr. Bezos here and his $1 million apartment are going to really drive up our averages and skew benchmarks. However, a median would include Jeff Bezos's crazy rent in its calculation, but does reflect a more central value of rent in New York. And I think in the world of influencer marketing, these kinds of outliers are also all over the place. Think about things, videos that go viral, posts that are shared a lot of times, et cetera. So we've accounted for those outliers with medians, which doesn't necessarily mean that extremely positive or negative performance should be excluded from your analysis, but rather to be mindful of its impact on benchmarks. All right, so getting right into it, this view takes a look at median reach and impressions on Instagram across various audience sizes. And this really gives you a sense of how many accounts or eyeballs you can expect your content to garner or reach, rather than be blinded by follower counts. And in general, the relationship between the two is that you'll have more impressions than reach, knowing that your content is likely going to be seen more than once by the same account. All right, so moving on to the next graph, we're going to take a look at median engagement rates on Instagram, and more specifically comparing content or sponsored content to organic content. And so this looks at posts with hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored, and compares them to those that do not. And in general, the relationship here is that organic content does perform higher than sponsored content, with the exception of a few audience sizes, such as you'll see here, the 1 to 5K range, 500K to $1 million, and $1 million plus. So talking about engagement, it is important to note that some people and organizations revert to engagement based on impressions and not follower count, which does inflate the rates significantly, which you'll see in this graph. This does vary by industry, but it is good to keep in mind when you're comparing apples to apples. And next, we have broken out median engagement for sponsored content by vertical. So this one was super interesting to look at. You'll see that all verticals essentially perform similarly, with the exception of beauty and travel slightly higher than the others. So this could be the result of posts that, that have really beautiful, captivating creative, which we do often see within the beauty and travel space. Beauty and travel content often skews aspirational, so showing people living their lives outside the norm, which is likely why these medians are slightly higher than the others. And you'll note that this graph does encompass a large range of brands and following sizes. It's not broken out by tier like we've seen in the other graphs. So definitely reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about that. All right, so now let's move away from Instagram and take a look at TikTok. Here we have median impressions by follower size. So at first glance, you'll notice that median viewership is generally lower on TikTok than on Instagram, meaning that the expectation for viewership is lower. However, the likelihood for virality is a lot higher. So talking about virality, the first example that comes to mind is Emily Mariko and her viral salmon rice. If you're familiar, TikTok, as a lot of us know, has been a breeding ground for a lot of creators to come out of the woodwork and achieve really insane viewership. So looking at this graph specifically, we can see the volume of posts within the 1 to 5K following size that go beyond their median impressions rate of 105.6. So if you try to imagine 105.6 on this graph, it's really, really close to the x-axis. And all the dots above it represent instances where a creator has gone above and beyond that threshold. And the scale is just so large that it's hard to really see where that 105 lands. But I think it's really telling about how viewership can work on TikTok. And virality, is something that we see across the board with TikTok. But something that's really exciting is that 1 in 10 of our contracted TikTok posts at Fohr do go viral. So definitely a great place for that. All right, now I'll pass it to Brandon.
Awesome, thank you, Lucy. Cool. So diving in and talking more about goal setting. Often when we're kicking off a campaign, questions that we ask are you looking for awareness? Are you shifting brand perception? Are sales and conversions important to you for this program and what we're looking to do? And oftentimes the answer that we get back to all of those questions is yes. And while yes is a great answer for one of them, it is tough when is the answer to all of them. And something that we've said recently is that you can't really hit 3 targets with 1 arrow. So you can definitely do 3 targets with 3 arrows, but it is really tough to be able to do that with it creates like conflated messaging, message bloat, and it really starts to feel more like an ad. And obviously what we've seen is that content that doesn't feel super bloated often performs a lot better. Yeah. So in talking with influencers and briefing them in, consider your own social behavior to remain realistic. Think about how you use the platforms that you're asking influencers to activate on. So I think about my own interactions, and I recently just moved into a new apartment and have been in the market for a coffee table. So I see an influencer post for that is a sponsored post for Westome, and I click their Instagram story and I find the one that I like. Then I see a paid ad because, Westome is really good at targeting me and I'm a sucker for it. And I start to do my own research. I start to measure. I see another influencer post and now they've got me in the end zone. I'm very close to buying this coffee table. I know what I want. You think the same way about influencer audiences, and like you need to learn more about a product. It's not necessarily just a one-to-one, like 1 post equals 1 conversion. So definitely stay the course in looking at the overall funnel and in goals and KPIs for a campaign. So really take into consideration here what your goals are and what you're looking to achieve. This is the standard marketing funnel running from awareness through purchase. And on the right, you'll see some KPIs. Again, not to caveat a lot throughout this, but these are just a sample of KPIs for a program. There's definitely a mix and match depending on what your goals are, depending on what the brand is that you're looking to achieve with the program that you're running. Cool. So getting into the really exciting part and the meat of this is setting fair benchmarks and how to actually do that. So first want to start out with what is a benchmark? I think it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but really being able to reinforce here that it is a place to evaluate or check something by comparison with a standard. And oftentimes the follow-up question or misconception here is that standard equals industry averages. And truthfully, I feel like this phrase gets thrown around a lot too, industry averages. They're somewhat mythological. They don't actually exist. And we're here to kind of debunk that a bit and say that you can create your own averages and your own benchmarks and your own standards with some of the things that we have coming up. So I think ultimately, like, what is the standard? You have the opportunity to create your own standard. And we've developed the 4 C's of benchmarking: category, company, creator, and chapter. So I'll hand it over to Erin to walk us through the first one.
All right, first up is category, where we're benchmarking against industry or category averages or medians. So this is going to be good for you if you're just getting started out in the influencer space or you're looking to gather learnings and tactics from your competitors. So for example, you're a hair care brand that's familiar and comfortable working with influencers, but you're launching a new dry shampoo, which is something you've never done before. So you'll look at your competitors within your category who also have a dry shampoo to see what they've done in the influencer space as a way to help you set your own benchmarks and goals for something that you've never done. We don't see this being good for comparing yourself against competitive brands that are too disparate from your own identity. So in other words, you want to look for brands that are within your category and are within your industry, but you want to make sure the brand identities are really carrying through based on your competitors and yourself. So for example, MAC and Bobbi Brown are both really powerful, awesome beauty brands, but their brand identities, their influencer archetypes, and their overall goals are likely going to be very different from one another. But just because they are both beauty brands doesn't mean that their goals are going to be the same. So it's important to take those nuances into consideration before relying on this method.
And then jumping into the second one, company. So benchmarking against prior campaign performance for your brand. This is really great for ongoing improvement and sustainable evolution. Really kind of harkening back to the metaphor that Grace used earlier is how fast have you ran a mile before? How can you increase the speed? How can you get more people to run the mile with you? Thinking about ways that you can kind of take learnings from your past programs and apply them to future ways that you want to work. And being realistic with what you've achieved in the past. This is definitely something that, we want to make sure that you're not only focusing on what you've done in the past, don't get too insular. Think about what other competitors are doing, but be realistic with what you've done in the past.
For creator, we're going to be benchmarking against average performance of your selected influencer partners on a campaign. So this is going to be great for assessing whether or not your message is resonating with the influencer's audience. If you're expecting someone who has a personal average engagement of 1% to perform at 2%, you're already setting yourself up to be disappointed before your campaign has even, launched off the ground. So take a look at the examples on the right of the slide. These are both really great beauty influencers, but they're clearly different, both visually in their aesthetics and also in their engagement. Instead of comparing these two influencers against one another and how they performed on the same campaign, what we should be doing is looking at how each influencer performed on the campaign based on their average performance overall. So what really is important here to consider is that just because the influencer on the bottom right of the screen has very high engagement does not necessarily mean that every single brand in the world should be rushing to partner with her simply because of her high engagement. What's really important is taking into consideration, how does an influencer really contribute to your brand message? How are they a fit overall? How can they tell your story to be a real fit for your brand before diving in and looking at their metrics? Just want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success and you're being, kind of honest about how your partners are going to perform based on what their performance is like, even outside of your work. So this tactic might not be good for you if you're unsure of whether the partners you have even selected are going to be a right fit to meet your brand needs. If you're still working out what kind of archetype you need to fulfill your goals, this might not be the method for you.
And then jumping into the last but not least, and my personal favorite chapter. So benchmarking performance by each phase of a long-term campaign. So this is almost, we've decided it's kind of like the advanced version of creating your own benchmarks and standards. You're really well-versed in the influencer space. You've run a lot of campaigns in the past and you're really clear of what your campaign goals are and what has worked for you in the past. This is really great for mid-program optimization, A/B testing, and really having an understanding of how to create better content and better performing content time over time. This is definitely not something we'd recommend if you are doing a quick turnaround campaign where you don't have the time to actually see how content is performing in real time. Often something that we say at Fohr is that the first pancake is, or the first program is very much the first pancake. And over time, your pancakes get better and better. The same is true about your campaigns. And I think even more specifically in a long-term program, the first phase is really that learning phase where you can see what is working and what isn't working. The variables here are the influencers that you're working with, the time that they're posting, the way that they're speaking about the product. And yeah, there's a lot of great things on there. And then an example of that is in phase one of a program, really leaning, this is a recent program that we ran where the focus for phase one was around entertainment and awareness. And we saw that we had around 84,000 interactions, that's likes, comments, shares, and saves. And we often, with the first phase of a program, when it's a long-term program, make sure that the influencers are really introducing their audience to the brand. So that in phase two, when we're ready to talk more message heavy, whether that's around a sale, an offer, or exclusive product details, we can really make sure that that's resonating with the right people. And as you can see from phase one, we talked more about just kind of general awareness. And then in phase two, their audience was comfortable and we were able to really take them through what the sale was going on. And we saw that the interactions had quadrupled. And that is a learning for us as well, that we were able to see that their audience was really focused more on exclusive offers that they were able to get by interacting with the content that the influencers were posting on their channels.
Awesome. So, before we kind of get into a little bit of diving back in here, I want to call out again that all of the data that Lucy shared is going to be available in the takeaways that we are sending out after this session. And again, so much of this has so much deeper nuance that should be tailored to your brand based on where you've been, where you're going, what we know based on industry standards or medians or averages, but also how we can apply those to your brand. So hello@fohr.co, we would love to talk to you. We would love to hear about your questions specifically. I know we already have some questions in the Q&A box. So also if you have questions that you'd like us to cover off on this webinar while we have you, we would love to see those. So drop those in while I'm going through some of these takeaways and tips. So the first one that I really want to talk through is that strong engagement rate does not mean strong ability to drive lower funnel metrics. This is a big myth in the space, that if you have strong engagement, it means that you definitely have an ability to drive an audience all the way down to conversion. And that's just fundamentally not the case. There are some people out there who have incredible engagement and incredible conversion. There's also so many who are the complete opposite. There's one influencer that comes to mind in particular who has an engagement rate of 1.2% on Instagram and has outperformed all of the other participants on a very long-term campaign by 10 times in terms of driving actual revenue for them. So it really isn't as simple as just saying who has the strongest engagement or who is driving the highest vanity metrics. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And so, if it was just about strong engagement, we would probably all be working with meme accounts and, people who are potentially doing a little bit of thirst trapping here and there, no shade at all. But that doesn't necessarily equate to an ability to drive your audience to actually convert to sale or give an email address or go to the website and check out more. Strong engagement doesn't equate to that trust and doesn't necessarily equate to those lower funnel metrics. So encourage you all to refer back to the funnel that Brandon shared earlier and think about, is this an awareness campaign or are we going further down the funnel than that? And let's base our strategy off that from the very beginning, which brings me to our next tip and takeaway. This is a huge one, and this is something that we experience all the time. We really need to be setting goals and how we plan on measuring before we're selecting our influencer partners. I can't tell you how many times we've had a scenario where we've had a team who are the ones working on the campaign in the day-to-day. They're really focused on finding the exact right fit influencers who can really personify and embody their brand authentically and can deliver their message persuasively, whose assets are going to be perfect for repurposing and who they really feel are truly the personification of their brand. And then we onboard all of those influencers, and then someone really detached from the campaign will set a benchmark for success that contradicts essentially who we've chosen. So Erin shared before the example of influencer A and influencer B, both beauty influencers. And the one who has the 35% engagement, Gen Z, super expressive, really bold makeup looks. Typically that influencer is speaking a lot more about mass products and has really different looks in the day-to-day versus Sona, who again had a 1 to 1.5% engagement rate. We've seen her convert really significantly on some of our campaigns for a more luxury elevated consumer with a minimal aesthetic. And she's really right for a lot of the brands that we work with, whereas the other influencer isn't. So if you're going to be, if you're setting goals and measurement strategy before you're selecting those partners, it means you're not going to find yourself in a scenario where, you know, your influencer has an average engagement of 1% and you're expecting them to perform at 2%. It's just fundamentally not going to happen. So the biggest impactor to your performance is going to be the people that you select. So it warrants spending solid time really being thoughtful about the partners that you're onboarding, and supports our broader philosophy of doing ambassador marketing longer term, so you can really be thoughtful and intentional and invest that time and energy in the upfront. The third is prioritizing persuasion over performance. So this is one of our 4 ambassador rules. We have 10 ambassador rules that really help us focus on, you know, the elusive word authenticity and how to get there. Performance is, of course, important. It's so important, and we need to be able to showcase success. But success shouldn't just be about metrics. It should also be about a deep investigation into sentiment. It should also be about stepping back as a human and looking at the post and saying, not just did this post get a great viewership rate or engagement rate, or did we drive a bunch of click-throughs, but also, is this persuasive? Is this something that is taking me from, you know, maybe not being familiar with this product to being more interested in it? We've seen so many examples of posts out there that, you know, it's a fragrance brand investing in this sponsored content, but then all of the sentiment is about the suit that the creator's wearing. And if you're finding yourself in that type of a situation, maybe your report shows that this is really working because all those, you know, performance metrics or vanity metrics are on the higher end. But the reason that someone's liking or commenting or clicking isn't actually the reason that you want and the reason that you have invested in this. So from our perspective, 1 like for the right reason is far better than 5 likes for something irrelevant. And so stepping back and registering that this is about persuasion and not just performance is incredibly important. Number 4, we talked about the 4 C's. So again, your own benchmarks for your company and your campaign shouldn't just be as one-dimensional as, okay, well, we saw the industry medians, let's use those industry medians and that's our benchmark. What if you're a lot better than that already? What if you're really far away from it? It needs to be more detailed and tailored to you. So different ways of tailoring that. So again, we first have the category, which is how fast are your competitors running? How fast is everyone out there other than us running? The next is looking at your own performance. How fast have I been able to run before? How fast can I run today versus how fast do I want to be running in a month, in a year, in 5 years? This space is not going anywhere, and we need to make sure that the learnings are compounding, and consistently keeping a pulse on your own company performance, irrespective of the goals, so you can compare and contrast, is super, super important. And fun fact on that, and just more of an event than anything else, I'd say 9 times out of 10, when we're briefed by a brand that we've never worked with before, there's not a whole lot of learnings to build from. It's essentially, we want an influencer campaign. We haven't seen success in the past. Help us. And we want to be, again, evolving beyond the first pancake and getting stronger each time. So that's the mentality that we're trying to encourage. The next is creator. So how fast can I expect this partner to run? Again, we don't want to select the wrong partner and set a benchmark up here. There's no way that they're going to be able to get there. Selecting the right creators that match your goals is the most fundamental impactor of your performance. And then chapter for our advanced influencer marketers out there, which mile did I run the fastest and why? Can I replicate that? What can I learn from that? Is that a seasonal thing? Is it because around holiday, you know, things are going to be performing different than earlier on in the year? Is it about the fact that this was a sale message and we had that really strong call to action? And can we incorporate that more if our metric for success is traffic or conversion? What can we learn from that, you know, chapter to chapter, phase to phase? Because if you've got the control of all of your partners and the only thing that's changing is the message and the timing, there's so much that can be learned from that. And number 5 is pretty savage of a takeaway. Monitor averages, but don't become them. I'll say that again. Monitor averages, don't become them. And what we mean by this is averages or industry or category performance, or even your own average on your campaign performance. That's really helpful to just get a sense of where things are at and to be able to compare this campaign to that campaign. But where all of the learning is in the high and the low. The low is going to tell you, here's what we want to move away from, or why didn't this work? Was it this partner? Was it this message? Was it this timing? The averages are going to tell you, again, just where you're at right now, or give you that apples to apples from one campaign to another. But it's on the higher end that where you can really analyze those all stars to be able to bring your average up. So monitor the averages, but don't focus too heavily on them, especially as we're entering this world where TikTok is becoming so much more dominant. The performance volatility is all over the place. And if you're just looking at averages, you're really not going to learn a whole lot. And so before we get into some questions, and I can see some in the chat, which is fantastic. The goal here is, again, not to run one fast mile as fast as you possibly can and then just throw in the towel and not do it again, or pick it up a couple of months later, but start from the same place of not having anything to build from. It's running faster and stronger every time. This space is exploding and it is taking over so many other forms of media and advertising spend. And so it's to completely reduce it to a place of, well, that didn't work, let's just start again and try again. It's not going to be enough. So every single campaign that you approach, we should be focused on setting those goals in the beginning, setting the right goals, and then setting a clear path to get there, and also how to measure it. Awesome. So I'm excited that we are going to have time to dig into some of these questions. So I can have Erin, Lucy, and Brandon, if you all want to throw your cameras back on in case any of these questions apply to you. Brandon, I can see that you've actually already answered a couple of questions privately, I think, in the Q&A, but would love you to cover off on one or two of them.
Cool, yeah. So it looks like the first two questions were around the phasing of the programs. So the first one is there any data around burnout over long-term partnerships and repartnering with influencers? So definitely take into consideration the nature of the product that you're marketing or your brand. For example, if you're a hair care brand and it doesn't probably necessarily make sense for a full year program that's centered around the same type of product, unless there are different products that you're going to be introducing throughout phases. Really think about the way that you're marketing those products for that type of program so that there isn't burnout. For example, retailers have a lot of space to play in for the full year, where they can bring in tech, they can bring in fashion. There are a lot of other products that you can bring in. So really think about the nature of the products that you're looking to market to ensure that there isn't burnout. Often what we also do is think of themes that encapsulate a certain phase of a program or a month that content's going live, to make sure that content feels different each month, even if it's the same product. It's focused on a different message or incorporating some kind of nuance to the overall brand. And then the other question was the budget consistent from phase 1 to phase 2? Yes. So for this program specifically, it was one holistic budget, and it was split 50-50 from phase 1 and phase 2. Allocation in terms of deliverables was that there was in-feed content for phase 1 and phase 2, but we were heavier on the stories in phase 2 to get direct swipe ups for that sale and offer.
Awesome, beautiful. So I hope that was helpful. And again, we've seen a big variety of burnout depending on brand to brand. So if that's something that you're experiencing and that you want to chat through more, we would love to talk to you about it and strategize on it. So definitely reach out. There's a couple of other questions in here. I am going to go with Haley Newbanks. So if you're a niche industry and consider yourselves a leader of the pack amongst competitors, which is the best benchmark to focus on of the 4 C's? Great question. Love that the 4Cs is sticking. So I would say the first is company, because if you're already ahead of the pack, so let's keep going back to that running analogy. If you're already running a 6-minute mile, there's no use in comparing yourself to someone, to the average being much slower than that. If you're already, going for a world record, you're going for a world record. You're not worried about the rest of your competitors. So I would say if you're already seeing yourself as being a leader in the space, definitely focus on consistently improving and just continuing to create more of a gap between you and your competitors. But how do you do that? One way could be looking at the creator C and saying, okay, we know we want to get better. We know we're already at this amazing place. We know that our partners are performing really well. How do we make sure that we are optimizing as we go to make sure that we are, getting the most out of our partners? So it's definitely the 4Cs as well can kind of be used as a combination. The real takeaway there is just that it's not just the one-dimensional approach. It can really, your benchmarks can be informed by a variety of sources. So I hope that was helpful, Haley. Great. And then there was a question that was a pretty simple one about the data, which was around, is the engagement rate based off in-feed posts only? Lucy, if you want to cover off on what the Instagram data was inclusive of, that would be great.
Yeah, so the data we showed earlier does focus on in-feed, but all different types of in-feed. So stills, carousels, reels, video, all of that.
Okay, great. Awesome. There was a question here as well. Curious how you determine the success of an activation with multiple stories and no in-feed content. We would assume the same people are seeing the stories. Great question. So a couple of things. I think the first is around how many people actually saw it. So depending again back to that funnel of what you're hoping to do with this campaign. So if this is an awareness campaign, it's really about looking at the viewership and the reach and how many eyeballs and people you actually were able to secure. We do have benchmarks by tier based on a viewership of stories of how many people you can expect to see a story. So definitely reach out to us. That wasn't data that was included in this presentation, but we do have that to give you a frame of reference of what you can expect. In general, depending on the tier, it can range from 3 to 5% on average of how many people see the content on stories. There's obviously influencers who are amazing outliers who have 12% or 18%, but those are few and farther between. So if it's an awareness campaign, that would be where you're looking to measure that success. But of course, if you're trying to drive action and if you're trying to get that audience to go elsewhere, you could be looking at sticker taps, which is the metric that shows you how many people have gone from your story over to your brand page. Follower acquisition these days on Instagram for brands is very tough. But to be able to actually get people to jump over to your social channel is essentially like driving social traffic. And obviously swipe ups and potential UTM tracking or affiliate tracking. Sorry, my background's like blowing in the wind there. To see the whole purchase journey all the way down the funnel. Okay, great.
Grace, it looks like there's a couple of questions around like another piece of like the something James actually answered in Negronis with Nord a couple weeks ago was around hidden likes and comments on posts. So something that James actually talked about and that we have been telling influencers is that in the content that you're creating for the campaign, you can't hide your likes and comments. We need to be able to see that in real time. You can definitely still measure the success of that content, even if it's hidden, with the insights that the influencers provide at the end of the campaign. Typically influencers hide them for like vanity purposes of like maybe that post didn't perform as a post that they had done recently. So you can definitely still get that, but we've requested that influencers do not hide likes or comments when they're creating content.
Awesome. There's also a question in here about what stats are important to pay attention to on TikTok when you're first starting out working with influencers. I have one that is super important to think about, which again kind of comes back to this like averages obsession that we have as an industry. If anyone is familiar with the TikTok marketplace, you'll see that the average viewership is always listed and sometimes average engagement. The average viewership numbers look wild and so exciting because you look at someone's account and you're like, wow, on average, they're reaching or they're having 200,000 views. That's awesome. Like that can be maybe our benchmark for what we could expect to see from this creator. But then you jump over to their TikTok and you look at, you know, do a quick human skim of how many views they've had on their last 10, 20 videos that can be as quick as a little scroll. And it's not 200,000, it's maybe 10,000 to 30,000. And then there's one huge viral moment that has skewed everything up and pulled it to a place where your expectation is now that this creator is probably going to drive you 200,000 views. And so many people are going to be so disappointed if we're using those averages when we're vetting those influencers. So vetting the influencers and deciding at the beginning of the campaign, what is important for us in this campaign? What is our goal? Who is going to be great in getting us there? TikTok vetting is, as we continue to evolve in this space, I think those metrics are going to be a lot less about what are averages and a lot more about, is this person tanking rarely? Are they going viral sometimes? And are they getting strong viewership consistently? And again, one of those charts back from earlier in the presentation was around median viewership on TikTok by tier. So that can give you a good sense of what you could hope to expect. But if we start trying to talk about category averages for everything on TikTok or even personal averages, it can become very challenging. So when we're promoting or presenting TikTok talent, we've started to incorporate a range of expected viewership to kind of show that rather than averages, which again takes a little bit of extra time, but think it is important in setting yourself up with a clear expectation of what you can expect from your partners.
There's a question here from Alejandra around, I'll just read it, is how do you research what competitors are doing with influencers across platforms? So there's a few ways to do this. One is like searching brand hashtags that you've seen for sponsored content for those campaigns. If you have access to the discovery tool at Fohr, you can also use content search to actually search. So let's say you're Kohl's and you're interested in what Target and Walmart are doing. You can search Target or Walmart in your content search, and you can get an output of what content is getting created by those other brands. Lucy, do you want to answer Christina's question about how to account for metrics and tracking when platforms change features or algorithms?
Yeah. How do you account for metrics when tracking? So we've actually seen a lot of change over the past year, which is a lot of the data that we just showed. And so what we have connections to a lot of our influencers' accounts. And so we're able to see how things shift as platforms and features are rolled out. We've been able to take a look at the differences between like IGTV and IG Reels. And so we're always keeping a pulse on that. And we're able to do that through connections that we have with influencers, as well as just keeping a pulse on the insights that come in through campaigns.
And we also redevelop formulas and metrics based on how those things are changing. So like for IGTV, for instance, was something at one point, like in algorithm shifting, IGTV was big. Now IGTV doesn't exist, and we've got Reels that's kind of been prioritized there, like seeing how those metrics change over time, which Lucy has actually dove into a lot of our data that focuses on how content performs temporally as well. So that allows for us to account for when Reels were getting prioritized maybe in Q3 last year. And then now in Q1, you have the option to move back to like a chronological order. So you're just seeing content in the way that it's posted. So we're definitely keeping an eye on those things as well and making sure that we're updating formulas and metrics as those things change.
Awesome. There's a question here from Blesley Thomas. When a company works with a certain number of influencers all the time, does the company have to let the influencer know how they fared in the particular campaign to negotiate payments? So this is a great question, essentially centered around giving feedback to influencers about how they compared to other people on the campaign. There's a couple of things to think about here. The first one is, first of all, giving your influencer partners at the beginning of the campaign the metrics that you are caring about the most, to help set them up to be able to deliver to those metrics. So, if someone knows that the main central, most important thing to you on this campaign is traffic, they might tweak their approach in how they deliver that content to optimize for that number. But so often influencers aren't even given that insight into the KPIs that they have. And so they can't, it's just like any job where if you don't know what the goal is, how are you going to be best placed to be able to meet that goal? So first step is not just giving them feedback once they maybe haven't hit your expectation, but setting the expectation of being clear about that in the very beginning. The next is around feedback, or in terms of in comparison to other partners. This, I think it depends. So if this is a campaign where it's a longer term campaign and they have the opportunity to improve, we do this a lot where we have like a mid-campaign check-in. We jump on calls with each of our influencer partners and give them a little bit of insight into how they're performing in comparison to people on the campaign, and kind of give some guidance or tips as to what we're seeing drive that really strong performance, to see if it could be helpful to help bring their performance up. General caution and reminder that these are still people. They are creative people. They're all different. Some people respond to feedback better than others. And just remember to not deliver feedback like a robot, or in a way that's just like, you performed worse than everyone else, and therefore next time we're going to pay you less. It's not going to go well for you. So, if you take the same mentality of like, how would I give tough feedback to a coworker or a teammate or a friend or a family member? If you're giving tough feedback that you're trying to, use in order to optimize performance in the future, still deliver it thoughtfully and with kindness and with intention, and not just treating people like, plots on a graph. Because again, a big priority should still be maintaining strong relationships. And ultimately that helps drive performance too. It helps you get more thoughtful creative, sometimes bonus content. They could be willing to work with you on different initiatives. So that should always be top of mind. So definitely kind of a bit of a balance there. It's great to give feedback. Often influencers are not re-engaged, and then they don't know why, and they would have loved the opportunity to be able to address feedback. So it's definitely an area that the industry can kind of grow in, and that we've done a lot of exploration in. So, just encourage that thoughtfulness as well.
And I think, Grace, too, that like being able to ask questions too, like sometimes the numbers are only half the story. I would say often the numbers are only half the story. Like asking influencers like why they think their content performed the way that they did, also allows for you to optimize your programs as well. Like, did you feel like this content actually resonated with your audience? We saw that the engagement was a bit lower. Can you explain why? And then it becomes more of a conversation. And like, maybe that person's like, yeah, my audience doesn't really resonate when I do flat lays. I know that was the brief. I was really excited to work with y'all. And then from there, now you can say like, okay, well, we know this person specifically doesn't really like to do flat lays. Let's test in phase 2 or on the next campaign and open it up to have the option to do a flat lay or like a close up of your face if it's like a skincare product, and see if that content performs over time. It really is about testing and learning and seeing what works with different audiences. What works for one influencer may not work for another.
Definitely. Awesome. And I know we have a couple of minutes left, and I can finish with one last question here, which is, how are you dealing with rising rates of partners and less creativity or lower metrics being delivered? So we actually have a full pricing webinar coming up in April, where we're really going to dig into, we track and save all of our pricing data. So we have average CPMs across different platforms and for different tiers. we're going to dig into the factors that impact pricing, because there's so much nuance in the space and so many different drivers. There has been an increase in rates over the past couple of years, and we want to dig into the why behind that. We're actually going to be joined by one of the founders of Archie, which is a freelance finance company, and also one of the founders of, pardon my language, Fuck You Pay Me, which is being dubbed the Glassdoor for influencers. So we're about to start promoting that and really excited to dig into that. And so if anyone has any questions specifically about pricing as well, we'd also love to hear from you on those ahead of the webinar in April. So you can send those over to hello@fohr.co. And so with that, we're at time. I want to thank you all again for joining us. I know that to take time in the middle of a busy work day to spend an hour learning about measurement and thinking about success is a big thing. And we are so flattered that you joined us. We loved having you here, and we would love to hear more from you. So don't be a stranger. hello@fohr.co. Thank you for joining, and have a great rest of your day.